Starting a business isn't hard if you know the right shortcuts to faster and smarter ways to start up. Go to starthacks.com/podcast for a full list of episodes and to get access to our free Startup in an Hour course. Start up fast and start up smart with Start Hacks. Okay, welcome to part 3 of the Startup in an Hour introduction. So in this video, we're going to talk about what it will take to make it through this process, talk about how it's feasible in an hour, the psychology of entrepreneurship and how that plays in, and why you need to start with why and how to do that, the market drivers that are insisting people start to become entrepreneurs, and then understanding a little bit more about the difference between a growth and an income business. So first of all, let me demystify 2 things right out of the gate. First of all, starting a business is not hard. It's actually very simple, and we're going to try to prove that to you in this set of videos. So let me briefly just step through the what is it and then the kind of business name for it. You create something of value. That's a product or service. You tell people about it. That's marketing. You pick a price for that value and ask them to buy it. That's sales. You exchange their money for your value and ensure they're happy. That's customer service. You innovate ways to repeat this process over and over as cheaply as possible with new products, and that's called scaling and growth. And that's really it. So you've done bits and pieces of all these things in your life, in your job, and just as a consumer in the market. You have interacted with all these things from the customer point of view. So you're really just reversing the role. You know what it's all about. You just have to do it for yourself. Now, the second piece is about technology. And why technology? Because it's the enabler of very inexpensive business fast these days. So it's simple. You just need to pick the right tools and invest a little time and get it done. So could you form a non-technical business with no technology at all? Of course, you could start a landscaping business. You could be a consultant or a freelancer. And those are all fine. And if that's the type of business you want to start, great. But what we're talking about in this course is leveraging technology to make your potential even better and turn it into a real business immediately. And by a real business, we mean something that runs while you sleep. So if you don't have a technology aspect, it's going to be unlikely that you can create something that you're not just constantly trading your time for money. So to do that, you need to use some level of technology. And so what I want to debunk here is to say that it's not hard. It's fairly simple, and you just have to pick the right tools. Every person who's ever worked with technology didn't know how to do it at first. So if you can use your smartphone and browse the web or work with some level of technology, you can build the basis of your business online. And even if that becomes an offline business, you can have this online component that is working for you while you sleep. So I'll provide a very low-tech solution in the built for you, but they'll cost a few bucks more. And then there'll be slightly cheaper do-it-yourself versions of each step. Now, there are free tools out there, and we'll get into this more, but in general, we don't believe in most free tools because the free tools always come with a cost down the line. And sometimes you're giving up a cost up front of the ability to customize or something. So there are free website builders out there, for example. And I'm not saying they're bad, but you have to realize that those are companies, and eventually they're going to want something for what they've given you. In the same way that Facebook isn't free. You're building content for Facebook. They're a profit company. And when you use a free website builder, yeah, it may get you launched fast, and you may have to do almost nothing at all to have that. But at some point down the line, they're going to monetize that business. It means they're going to put ads on your website. They're going to change the way it looks without you wanting it to change. They're going to make you upgrade in order to do something about that. And a lot of those free builders make it impossible to export what you've built. So it's usually too late. So once you've built something there, realize it doesn't satisfy your needs long term. Now you're stuck, and everything you've built is going to be very difficult, and it's not going to look the same if you try to pull it out of those systems. So there are some free tools we work with in this course, and some of them are still good, but usually the time runs out on those, and it gets to the point where the company behind them has to start making some money in some way. So we feel it's better to start with the right tool at the right price up front, and then prevent having to change things later, because that becomes much more expensive. So I just want you to get it out of your head that you can't do this and simply do it. We went through the 5 principles that we want you to follow. And besides design and startup principles, there's a psychology here that you have to be willing to commit to, because this is the reality and this is what happens. Your brains overanalyze things and you'll talk yourself out of taking any risks. So to make it simple, stop talking, stop thinking, and just do it. And this is what we're here to do in an hour. Don't make excuses. Don't say why you didn't do it. Live by the principles and have fun doing it. So are we going to create Uber? And I love to use Uber as an example because they're one of the most impressive growth startups of all time. But are we going to build that in an hour here? No. I mean, we have to be realistic. We're not going to globally disrupt multiple industries and have a 50 billion valuation in an hour. But the basis of all businesses are the same. And we're going to go through that process here to get that started. So let's talk about why you need to start with why. What's your motivation for doing this? It needs to be clear, because this question is going to drive everything you do. And every time those doubts pop up, every time a risk comes along, do I want to spend this $20? Every one of those little risks will go back to the source of why you're doing this. And if it's not a good foundational reason, you'll start to slip. And as soon as you slip once or twice, all of a sudden you'll look up a month later and you haven't touched the business that you started. So first thing, a lot of people do this because they think it's going to make them money. Is that your reason? Well, it's not a bad reason. And you just have to realize that at first, it's usually not enough of a reason. You can combine it with another why on the list, but it's usually out of the gate not the right reason. Now, long-term, and long-term could be 6 months or a year, you may look back and realize that this was the best financial decision you ever made. And if you do it right the way we're describing in this course and monetize it from the start, or at least understand how you can monetize it from the start, you'll realize that money can be a good driver here. And you can, especially, this is more advanced stuff that we won't have time for in this course. But once you start to realize the tax benefits and all the reasons that you can benefit from having a business, you realize you have to make a lot more money in the regular W-2 earning world than you have to in entrepreneurship to keep the same amount. So the second thing is, do you want to change the world? And, this is, of course, an overused cliche, but the idea is you're changing some part of the world by creating something on your own and not just spinning someone else's hamster wheel. You're out there doing something on your own, and maybe you're just changing a small piece of the world, but you're changing it. You're changing your own life too. This driver can be more than enough, especially when combined with another good reason. So you just have to be patient if you really want to do this. And we're going to talk about a few of the, especially in the growth versus income of how this why driver plays in. But think of this not as like changing the whole globe, but just changing some part of the world, changing some part of your world. Do you have a passion or some idea that just won't let go of you? This is the one that drives me personally and some of the other founders at Start Hacks. And you'll find that a lot of the true core entrepreneurs, even ones that have spent years and have struggled and maybe haven't ever really had that success that they thought financially, but they'll realize that this passion of having some idea that they just can't get out of their brain is important. And this one is a critical one that will keep you interested. If you just have some idea that you just know the world needs, this is one of the best drivers. Another one that drives us here at Start Hacks is independence and lifestyle. So this one evolves too as you realize how free your mind becomes when you are able to be building things on your own every day and not doing something that someone else is just telling you to do. So this one's a very valuable thing. And if you combine this with another passion, another why in this list, then you're likely not to fail. So if you start to crave this independence and lifestyle from entrepreneurship, and have a passion, or you want to change the world, or financial driver, combining multiple whys becomes more and more important. So it's important to think this through, because again, all of the risk that you take will come back to you questioning your core decision to do any of this in the first place. And if you don't know, then this is a problem. So get started with what we're doing in this course, but prioritize finding an answer to this question for yourself. So, why do you want to be an entrepreneur is then made more important when you start to think of the context around what's happening in the economy. So these are some statistics about growth in entrepreneurship around the world. And if you look around at the economy and combine what's happening with robotics and artificial intelligence, there are a lot of estimates showing that in 20 to 30 years, the amount of jobs available in the market relative to today could drop by 30 to 50%. And the reason is a lot of things have been more and more automated over the last couple decades. And now with artificial intelligence and robotics, a lot of basic jobs are just plain going away. It's getting easier and easier to either outsource or turn things into jobs that are no longer needed at all. And so I just threw up these stats here so you can think through and see, like, look at the growth of entrepreneurship in places like Africa, where they now are suddenly having the ability to get access to small micro funds and things like that. You're going to have a world that is more and more driven by entrepreneurship every year. So the quicker you start it and get your family started in this process, the better. And another important statistic is to know that crowdfunding growth is growing by 20% in emerging markets. And this is just going to drive the ability for more and more people to be entrepreneurs, and less people are going to be creating jobs because there's going to be more entrepreneurs and less jobs to be had. So just a few statistics to think through as an additional driver, an additional why of why you want to start you and get your kids and your family and people thinking about entrepreneurship instead of these traditional paths that just aren't going to be there as much in 20 years. And that's not even a generation away. So I want to cover a little bit about growth startups versus income businesses, because this is a fundamental concept of understanding that, right now all you hear about in business, or mostly what you hear about, are these startups, these big growth startups that come up with some idea that disrupts and destroys traditional markets and changes the way business is done, and they get enormous amounts of funding, and that's all great. But that's not what most people are going to do. Most people are going to start income businesses. And then there's another type that are really more trade your time for money, freelancing and things like that. And we're not talking about those type of businesses at all in this course. But we think that the foundation of both of these types of business is the same. And what we build in this course could turn into either a growth startup or an income business. And we're going to encourage looking at an income business from the start, because even if you don't decide to monetize it right off the bat, you start to learn about the type of income that you could earn. And eventually all growth startups have to have some income model. It may not happen right off the bat, but let me just explain a little bit about the difference between these two. So with the growth startup, you're looking at a higher risk profile, relatively speaking. And you're focused on rapid growth. You're focusing on getting something out quickly, learning, and putting something new out, and rapidly grabbing customers. And you potentially are sacrificing profit for years, and maybe if ever, until you have some sort of buyout event. And generally a growth startup is going to be seeking funding more often than not. And the difference is, you may be in debt for a while, and debt may mean that you've taken on funding. And you're kind of putting yourself in the hole, but your idea is that you're going to grow this thing fast and furious and change a market by doing so. Now, an income business, and sometimes these are a small version of them, are called lifestyle businesses. They're lower risk, relatively speaking, because you're focused on quick profitability right out of the gate. and you're potentially sacrificing rapid growth, but you still could grow them in the same way. And they're generally more bootstrapped companies that, you know, maybe you won't be in debt for nearly as long because you may not have to take funding. And you'll see what we build in this course, it doesn't cost that much. And you could turn something into a profitable business quite quickly that, in our opinion, could then be turned into an income business because you'll have learned about a market, you'll have learned your customers, and at any point you could then take less of a risky leap by taking funds that you've earned through the business and investing them instead of having to get funding. So usually companies don't grow drastically without some sort of funding, but you can have a very successful business for yourself. And you have to decide if you really want that growth startup lifestyle as well. It's a different thing. When you take on funding, you're taking on a boss in a way. You've taken on somebody who now has the right to pull your strings. And it's definitely a dedication to go that route. And those businesses are more likely to have more failures because they are taking bigger risk for bigger potential reward. So we just want you to stay open-minded, keep both paths flexible, and we'll go a little more into this into the next video as well. So in the next video, we will talk about part 2 of the growth versus income. We'll talk about the difference between an MVP and a content site. We'll get a little bit into products, partners, and value, and some of the income models, and see if we can figure out which path is right for you. So we'll see you in the next video. Isn't it time to stop talking about how great your startup idea or plan for an income business is and finally build something so you can prove it to the world instead? Get our free Startup in an Hour course at starthacks.com/learn. Startup fast and startup smart.